So you guys wanted more Challenger t-shirts, and they're back. Make sure you hit the link in the top right in the video right now or in the description below so you can make sure you get your Challenger shirt before they run out. And line it up, and we're good. Now we have full range of motion. So that's first, second, third, fourth. The cross hatching is still very visible. In the last video we left off with pulling out the original lifters. Now again, just to remind you, the reason we are doing this is because these are MDS lifters. Now what that is Chrysler's cylinder deactivation system. And what we did was actually pick up a new set of OEM non-MDS lifters. And the only difference is there are holes that redirect oil in the lifters to deactivate them and basically shut down those cylinders. So if you look here when we pull these out, these are roller lifters. You'll notice that in these right here are non-MDS lifters in the back, and these have holes in the front. See that? That's because oil is redirected in these lifters and shuts off those. So we want to take those out because we have a manual car. We don't have a computer controlling when MDS is coming on, so we would have to leave it unplugged. So I just wanted to take away any kind of possibility for error and make sure we put in some non-MDS stuff. And off camera, I had actually cleaned up the tops of all the pistons, so that way that they'll be ready to go when we go to put the heads back on. I don't have to worry about any of that. The only thing we really took the heads off was so that way we could get these lifters replaced. And again, I mentioned I don't know if you have to do this when doing a non-MDS delete, but I'm doing it anyway. Now on the inside of the lifter bores, make sure it's clear of obstructions, make sure nothing's in its path. All these are good. Just take a little dab of oil and then go on the inside of all these, just to make sure that once this thing fires up for the first time, it's going to have something to at least lubricate before the engine is totally primed. Doesn't hurt just to have a little extra insurance on that one. Now this is a roller lifter cam, so we don't have flat tappets like we do. I still added just a smidge of Moly assembly lube just to be on the safe side. It doesn't necessarily need it, but I added just a little bit just to help it out because it does still create a wear pattern on a roller cam, but just not as severe as it would on like a flat tappet cam. So we'll do this to all the rest of the lifters real quick and torque them down to spec and make sure everything's good to go. The Mopar book tells us 9 foot-pounds. Mine doesn't do that, so I'm just going to round her up to 10, call it good. And yes, I did do this off camera. I'm just showing you that I did do it. Alright, now it's time to go back the other direction. That's great. Got a brand new gasket set from Felpro. This is for their front timing cover, and it also comes with the front main seal, so we'll pop this into place. And what I want to do is actually paint the engine. Now, this is going to spark a lot of debate, and that's good. So be it. So I'm going to get this gasket in place. And I really like these because they just lock in where you need them. Not having to put RTV all over the place and hope for the best. Hope your gasket stays in. This is pretty neat stuff. Never actually got to use something like this before. It goes to show you how dated I am on engine stuff. Honestly, the gasket that I pulled off still looked good, but better safe than sorry when it comes to stuff like this. You never know if you might have a dry gasket, or the instance where the possibility that something has ripped and you don't notice it right off the bat. So a set like this from Felpro, it's not expensive, so you make what you need, we're good to go to put the timing cover back on. Now I really don't remember which bolt goes where on this timing cover, but luckily I kept it on the bag, so we can at least maybe figure out where things need to go. Put you on here, line it up the best that we can. Sure enough. Man, broke the ziplock. Good thing we don't need it anymore. Oh. There goes to the water pump. Just get one started to hold it in there. So our trusty little guide is telling us to torque everything down that is timing cover and water pump associated to 21 foot-pounds. So that's what we're going to do. I didn't really get it. They didn't list like a sequence, so probably just go from like top to bottom and make up my own. And we'll get there eventually. So the engine is all cleaned up. I scuffed it up and it's ready to paint. You'll see here we have a couple of different coats of paint we'll be using. First we'll be using the high temp primer, and then next we'll be using Chrysler Blue. Now a lot of people are going to be upset about that, but you know, overwhelmingly I did a poll on Instagram and 74% I believe voted for the blue over black. So I mean, I'd already bought it by the time I put the poll up, but that just kind of reaffirmed what I wanted to do. So we'll hit it with the primer, then hit it with that blue. That's the same blue that the 318 that was in the car would have come with from the factory. And I've never seen anybody else do it that I could find on the internet, so I thought, hey, why not try it out just to see what it looks like. And if we don't like it, we'll just paint the whole thing black. No big deal. And hopefully it should work. I've done this method many times. I did it on my Charger, and it worked great. So we'll set everything up, get the camera rolling, we'll start painting. And there's the blue, finally done. I haven't used blue since my first Dart Sport. I painted that engine the original Chrysler Blue, just like that. And I gotta admit, it looks really good. I know a lot of people are gonna hate it, a lot of people are gonna love it. So I'm on the bandwagon for blue. So it's the next day, I untaped everything, stuck the heads on just for the heck of it. They're not even bolted on yet. And then laid the intake on with the valve cover on this side. And I don't really like the bare heads. That's why I really put it together. I think that it's going to look a lot better if we paint those cylinder heads too. So I'm going to take this all back apart and let's lay it out here in the grass, and then I want to degrease everything and really clean up all the aluminum. I just don't like the way that looks. We really have to clean it up, and the fact that these heads are low miles, so that's why I didn't get them sent out to checked over. But they're low miles, so I didn't see a need to do that. The 64,000 miles. So instead, just gonna take them out, degrease them, clean them up, and paint it. I think that's the best thing we could do. So to clean the cylinder heads, we're going to use a degreaser instead of just using brake cleaner. We're going to get all these intake ports where the EGR has really just oiled up everything. I want to get rid of all that. So, I plan to do this even if I didn't paint them, but either way, they just needed to be good and cleaned up. I took the spark plugs out, and we'll just let it sit here and soak for a few minutes, and we'll spray it all down. So luckily this sludge buildup really didn't get far down into the intake ports, mainly because this is such a low mile engine. It probably stopped at midway down the intake port, but look at this. That's what's built up on the inside of that intake port. So what I did was take this brush and really scrub everything that I could and make it at least better. So I'm gonna spray it with the hose right now with the jet setting on my gun here, and if that doesn't do it all completely, then I'll go back and probably pressure wash both heads. Now the cylinder heads are back in the shop. Everything looks cleaned up and nice. We're going to let them dry. I go through there and just wipe everything off with a towel and make sure all the ports are really good and dry before we start trying to paint and install anything. But look at that. Check out those intake ports. These things look brand new. So we need to clean up the gasket surface. You can see here there's a little bit of residue left over from the intake. We'll clean that up and make sure everything's good to go before we install it. But for right now, we'll hit the outside with a little bit of brake cleaner to get all the extra residue off. But once we do that, it's prepped for paint. So let it sit here, calm down for a minute, and we're good to go. Next thing we'll do is tape up all these ports, make sure that nothing gets inside those, because we want to make sure that we keep that nice machine surface. That way we don't interrupt any kind of like gasket surfaces and make it harder for the intake gasket to seal. So we'll tape all this up right here and then lay some paint on it. That's what I'm excited for. The reason I didn't paint these with the engine is because I wanted to see how the bare aluminum looked before painting it. Because sometimes, you know, bare aluminum does look pretty good, and I think it would have, but I think it'll look a lot better with them painted. And being that they're rough cast instead of like a machine finish on the outside, it's going to be really easy to paint. So it's already kind of a rough surface for the paint to stick to. So that's why I was like, you know, just go ahead and do it. I wish I would have done it on my Charger when I did the 440 build with the 440 source heads. And I think these will just give it that little extra step to make it look that much better. So here's a little progress on the cleanup of the cylinder head. You can see this is what we looked like before. And this is after I'd even cleaned up yesterday with a little degreaser. So we're going to continue on our path of cleaning up the cylinder heads. You can see in the back there, that's what it looks like as of right now. Still working on this one here. Got just a couple little bits left to do. But overall, definitely looks a lot better. So you really want to clean up these combustion chambers as best you can if you're not going to take them apart, which I'm not. So I wanted to kind of get all this grime and build up for a fresh start for the heads. So just been tediously cleaning up these things. They're kind of not, it's not fun to do, that's for sure, but I'm just working my way through it and slowly scrubbing these things with a little brake cleaner, a little brush that I got here, same one you saw me using earlier. Except this one's plastic, so it won't damage the head or the casting or anything like that. And these surfaces, which I didn't scratch it on here, I just wiped it down with brake cleaner. But this little plastic brush works wonders. It's plastic, so it's not going to harm anything in the combustion chamber itself. Here's a little before and after comparison. Now, just keep in mind that I have not cleaned the head surface, like right here. Have not done that yet. So all I've done is the actual chamber of the head. So you can look. This is really what these two look like. This was actually one of the worst ones, but I've let them soak a little bit in brake cleaner while I'm cleaning the other two, but still, I mean, look at that build up right there. This is what's being burnt up, or tried to be burnt up at least, in your combustion chamber. So that's why, I mean, it is kind of backyard, but it is better than to leave it there. So with just like a couple dollars worth of brake cleaner and this handy dandy little plastic brush and a little bit of time, you can make your cylinder heads look a heck of a lot better than what they started out with. So that's really all I've been doing, just taking my time, getting in every single little tiny spot, and making sure it all looks good and clean. So, you know, get them pretty close to what it left the factory looking like, at least, you know, get all the buildup off, you know, because we don't want any of this really starting to build up around the bottom of the seat of the valve and plugging up anything. So that's why we really want to clean it up, especially around those valves. So you can tell a really big difference in what we're doing here. It may seem tedious, but it does help in the long run. Heads are taped up, cleaned up, prepped, ready to go. I do 2 coats of primer, 3 coats of color, just like we did on the last one, and that's really about it. You see I didn't really tape up the exhaust ports, just put some rags in them. It really doesn't matter. I really wanted to make sure that the intake ports were nice and taped up and ready to go, because this is where all the mixture is going to be going in, so I don't want things going into the head. But if we have like a little paint on the surface right here, all that's coming out of the head, so it doesn't necessarily matter. It's not going back into the engine, and we'll clean up these surfaces when we go back to put a gasket on it. So that's why I just didn't really waste any time taping those off.
we have our paint laid down. Everything is good. Just dry to the touch. So let's go ahead and wrap it. Now, I know that there's going to be a lot of interesting comments over what we've done here, and I know that just because I painted the blue on the Charger back whenever I did it, and I actually used turquoise, early Chrysler turquoise, instead of this corporation blue, and a lot of people weren't really happy with that. And that was the original color that the engine came with in that car, but it wasn't the original engine. It was a 440. And this is the original color that the 318 that was in this car would have had. Now, I know why people are going to get angry about this is the fact that this is not the original engine, and it's a Hemi, and no Hemis came in blue. And yes, that's true, but I think that this blue looks awesome, and that's really what I'm wanting to kind of talk to you guys about, is that you really can do whatever you want in stuff like this. In this day and age, you know, it's really up to you to make your car your own, because there's so many cars out there that what does it matter? I mean, there's restorations, and you can do a restoration for sure. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I love a good restoration. But when it comes to something that I'm not even putting the original engine back in, I think it's cool to have this blue. I don't really care for orange engines, and I figured let's just paint it what the original color would have been. So it's more of a what if, and it kind of really makes people kind of stop and like, what? Why is this engine blue? It's the right color engine, but it's not the right engine. What is this? And that's really, I'm kind of going for that shock value. Like, hey, whoa, what is that? So it's really what I wanted to do, and I wanted to just kind of say that, you know, you can paint your Hemi blue if you want. You can do a lot of things in this world, and there's going to be people out there telling you that you can't do something, you can't do this, or you can't do that. If you guys saw what I saw every day as far as comments go, telling me how stupid some of the things I've done, and I realize that there are some things I'm like, man, I should have done differently, but just like things that they think are stupid because they wouldn't have done it that way. And there's nothing wrong with doing things your way, but that doesn't mean that there's only one way to do something when it comes to a vehicle. And that's what you got to realize, is that there's a lot of things you can make your own on something like this. And that's why I like vehicles, is because it's more of an extension of your personality. It's not just cut and dry. It's not cookie cutter. You can have whatever you want in this car, and I just so happen to want a blue Hemi. And I'm telling you what, just looking at it right now, these cylinder heads, looks good. I'm really enjoying my decision right now. But it's really what I wanted to talk to you guys about this go around, is that no matter what you do in life, there's going to be somebody out there telling you, hey, you can't do it this way, or you shouldn't do it this way. Why not? Why do you have to do it? Like LS swaps right now in Mopars, people are angry. I'm like, so what? They're putting vehicles back on the road. They're putting stuff that should be driven on the road. So what if it's powered by something else? The car doesn't know what kind of engine it has. This Challenger is not going to know it has a Gen 3 Hemi in it. So why should I care? All I care about is this thing roasting tires and being fun to shift gears in and drive, and looking good while doing it. And I think this blue's really going to pop doing it, all that good work right there. So just take everything that people say with a grain of salt. There are multiple ways to do things. There's always more fun ways to do something, and you know, to an extent, you can really make a thing like a vehicle your own. And where things like that just come into play is like paint your engine blue. So I wanted blue, so that's why I got blue. I can see the comments now. There's going to be somebody who didn't watch this part, and they're going to say you should have painted the engine orange because that's what these cars came with. And there's going to be people mad at me for not putting the 318 back in the car. There already has been hundreds of people mad at me for not doing that. So I say let them talk. So here we have some genuine Mopar MDS block off plugs. Now what this does is just a placeholder for these MDS solenoid holes, because whenever you take the solenoids out, there's just these places that you got to fill up with something. So these are actually factory parts. Now when Chrysler actually
did the earlier run of the Hemis, believe that the trucks didn't have MDS, and even before that, like the 2003 to 2005 didn't have MDS. Don't quote me on those years, I may be wrong, but around that time frame, MDS was not a thing, and I believe some vehicles with those with certain options would not come with MDS. And what I did was I found a part number online, went to O'Reilly, and I told them that part number, and they said, yeah, sure, here's what we can get you, and this is what they did. They weren't terribly expensive. I would say they were, I can't remember, I think they were like less than $100, but I don't know for a fact. But it comes with the new retaining clips, and they simply just pop right in. So that this is like the part that really completes the MDS delete swap on top of the lifters. Now the cam, you can run a different cam if you want, but I'm still running the same cam that I had with the old lifter setup, and I don't see anything wrong with that. We'll just have to make sure that our new lifters are going to wear properly, and that's why we put that assembly lube at the very beginning of the video. So with these plugs, we'll be able to actually put the intake back on after the heads go on, of course, and we'll have a complete, just about, engine ready to drop in the car. And that's really the goal of this video. We want to make sure that we have everything to go for when we put it in, because we don't want to have to fool with any of this. But like I said, they weren't expensive, and didn't really have any trouble finding them. But they come in these Chrysler bags, so I guess Melling makes them for Chrysler. But once we have all these in, MDS has been officially deleted. Lifters here, MDS block off plugs. There's the part number. I believe that's it right there in case you want to do this yourself. So there's our head gasket installed, and Felpro really does make it easy. You can see right here, that's the good old-fashioned Felpro brand head gasket right there. They make it easy on us because they label which cylinders this is supposed to cover. So you can see right here, if you look real close, you'll notice it says 2468 stamped into it, and then over here on this side it says top. So you know that this is the top side right here of cylinder 2468 head gasket. So you're really foolproof, and you know, because a lot of times there's head gaskets that can go on certain ways. They have to be the correct way, and this being one of them, Felpro wants to make sure you do it right. I appreciate that greatly. And you can see all the ports, all the holes line up, so we're good to go on that front. And one thing, if you guys ever want to know why it takes me so long to do some of these builds, is because this little dowel pin right here was missing. This little alignment pin. I could not for the life of me find it. And I looked, I started calling around trying to buy a new one. Could not find one anywhere. And it turns out that whenever I pulled the old head gasket, it had stuck inside of there. And I was able to find it because I had this one. This one stuck into the head itself, and I pulled it back out and put it in it. And this one was just gone. I didn't know where it went. And sure enough, I went and looked at the old head gasket, and it was stuck in there. Thank goodness. But now that we have all of our stuff the way we need it to, we can finally put the heads on. Here we have cylinders 1, 3, 5, and 7 with the top side facing up. Put them over our alignment pins. And now we can bolt the head on. There's the passenger side head, if I can find those alignment pins. 1 and 2. Nice. And the driver's side. There you go. These are our small bolts that go up top right here, and just setting them in here, there's no sequence just yet. We don't have to worry about a sequence until we start torquing these suckers down. That's when things start to get interesting. So what I want to do is take all of these bolts and just snug them. I'm not even going to try to tighten them down yet. I just want to get them in place and get them ready to torque, because we're going to have to do all of this in a sequence and then torque them to yield. So and I'll show you how to do that here in just a second. just saw me do is actually snug these bolts down until they have the slightest little bit of resistance. That way I know that I'm not having to sit there and spin everything. I did it in sequence. I don't know if that really matters, but I did it anyway. So they're all snug and at least seated. They have no torque on them yet, but what the Mopar guide says to do is to torque all 10 of these first to 25 foot-pounds, because we're going to do these in stages. So I've got my torque wrench here set to 25 foot-pounds, and I'm just going to run through the sequence. Now it wants us to torque the remaining 5 bolts to 177 inch-pounds, or 15 foot-pounds roughly. So that's just what I'm going to do, is 15 foot-pounds. Now the sequence calls to do 1 through 10 again, but at 45 foot-pounds. Same sequence. And now we do the remaining 5 at 21 foot-pounds. And what you see here is a torque angle gauge, and what this does is it actually will measure how many degrees we're turning the bolt. And the instructions after that 45 foot-pound torque on these 10 right here wants us to turn it an additional 90 degrees. So what we do, we set this rod up right there. See how we have it set up against the spark plug tube? What we're going to do is crank on this breaker bar here until it touches 90 degrees on that back side. Now we have to drop in our push rods before we assemble our rocker gear. And you'll notice that we have a bunch of different push rods here, but they're 2 different lengths. Now on these Hemis, the shorter push rods are actually the intake. So we'll drop these into place, back in the factory location. What that sound is me actually pushing the lifter down onto the cam lobe. And now we can install the exhaust side. There. 2, 3, and 4. And there's all of our push rods. We can install the rocker arms. Get these chilling out on top of the valve springs. Real easy if you can roll them all at one time. Tilt the bolts back. Guide them in. We'll just start a couple to keep it from moving back and forth. Now you don't want to go cranking on one end of the rocker assembly and then go to the other end, because you very well could break it. These are a shaft rocker style, and put any kind of weight on one end too much, it can break. I've actually had it happen to me before. So what I like to do, start in the middle, get a little tension, go to the next one. Tighten it down just a smidge. Get a little tension on it, go to the next one. Just work your way out. And eventually you'll be able to overcome those valve springs and fully seat the entire rocker assembly. We'll go out here as soon as we get some tension. Okay, and go back to the middle. See how it's loosened back up? That's because we're getting weight distributed now. And we'll slowly work our way until the entire assembly is touching, and then we can torque it down. Now that everything is fully seated, we will torque them to the recommended 16 foot-pounds. At this point in the game, it's a good idea, once you have everything torqued down, to spin the engine over by hand. It just makes sure that everything is going to communicate and not hit each other. So we'll spin it over a good few times. Make sure our push rods are still where they need to be, mainly. Everything's looking good. I think we're all right. Now that's a good looking engine. I don't care who you are. That looks absolutely amazing. We still have to clean up the valve covers and the intake. They're still wearing their junkyard dirt, but other than that, the engine is pretty much ready to go. We still have to install the crank pulley and then get our accessories sorted out. But we can do that when it's actually in the car. And again, once those the valve cover and the intake are cleaned up, we'll add our gaskets to it. They're just sitting on there; they're not even bolted on. Just wanted to give you guys an idea of how this thing is going to look. That blue and black just pops. The only thing we did was take the heads off, inspect it, put the new lifters in, and new head gaskets, new water pump, timing cover gasket, timing chain. I mean, just basic stuff. We didn't do any kind of performance upgrades. So this is really just a baseline. And again, I'm not doing any kind of performance upgrades right now just because I want to get the feel for it of doing a Hemi swap without complicating things. So just wanted to kind of get an idea of how things work. And then we can do some cam swaps later on in the future. But man, that's going to look so good in the Challenger. We did it. The engine is painted back together, has all new gaskets on the inside, minus a couple things as we talked about. But yes, it's pretty much ready to go back in the car. I cannot wait. We have a couple things left, like the mod on oil pan we have to do, and then the intake gaskets and valve cover gaskets. That's it. It's ready to go. I cannot wait. And that's going to be in the next video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Appreciate everything that you guys have done for me. If you liked the video, please leave a like down below. If you have a question for me, feel free to leave a comment. Order your t-shirts and your stickers. The Challenger t-shirts are back in stock, so make sure you get them before they run out. And I appreciate all the stuff that you guys have done. This has been an awesome build. I cannot wait to see this thing finally fired up the first time. And this blue, I cannot get over this blue. So thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.